several other different interesting storylines out there. The number of coaches that continue to be fined for inappropriately wearing their masks in the NFL, $100,000 for the coaches, $250,000 for the teams. That seems to be pretty excessive in general. And many of you are weighing in and saying you don't agree that NFL coaches should need to wear masks on the sidelines at all. Nearly 16,000 of you have voted so far. 93% of you are saying it does not make sense for coaches to be wearing masks on the sideline, given the fact that players are sweating, tackling, and standing on the sidelines themselves without masks on. Nearly 16,000 of you have voted in the first hour of that poll. Again, with 93% of you saying no, it does not make sense. You can go vote in that poll yourself. You can also call our phone lines 877-996-6369 and weigh in on that question. We are at Wednesday now. We just had the Notre Dame South Florida game canceled yesterday, I believe. But so far, every SEC football game remains on track, knock on wood, because possible that some of them will have to end up being canceled. But right now there are 7 different SEC football games scheduled to be played on Saturday. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for it. He's come on this show a lot. You can go listen to a long-form Wins and Losses podcast with Greg Sankey if you have a chance and you want to listen to a really good one. By the way, we got some good ones up right now. We're going to have Megyn Kelly. If you remember her from Fox News and NBC, she is going to be on the Wins and Losses podcast with us early next week. That is scheduled. Pretty cool. But if you haven't listened to the Wins and Losses podcast exclusive, whether it's Kirk Herbstreit, whether it is Colin Cowherd, Jason Whitlock, the senator from Missouri, Josh Hawley, we've got so many different interesting and fascinating conversations about so many different topics that I would encourage you to make sure that you haven't missed the Wins and Losses podcast. And if you're out there and you just want long-form, interesting conversations, how many of those do we have now, Dub? 32, 33 of them? Mike Leach. I mean, I could run through an entire litany of really interesting dudes that and ladies that we have talked to in those conversations, and I would encourage you to check them out. They're timeless in the sense that you can go listen to one from last year and it'll sound, I think, just as good today as it did a while ago. And you have actually, you're one of the few people probably, Dub, other than my mom, who has listened to almost every minute of every one of those Wins and Losses podcasts. They're really good. I mean, as an objective listener, they're tough to beat in the world of sports media, politics, and business.
Yeah, I agree, because your guests range, like you just said, not just sports, but politics, business, and beyond. We had an awesome conversation with Ovik Roy, a name that a lot of people probably aren't, too terribly familiar with. But I remember recording that one, listening, because I kind of get the sneak preview from everybody, because I get the first listen out of anybody in the world. And that one was pretty remarkable. He is probably the smartest guy I've ever heard speak. But yeah, I think the number now is about 33, if I'm not mistaken. So over 30, and with more to come in the following weeks and months.
And we just put up, if you missed it, we've had the President of the United States on twice, Donald Trump, here recently. We had him on in August, and we had him on last week, I believe it was. And we have now put up both of those long-form interviews. The President spent almost an hour with us on OutKick in the past couple of months. And so if you missed those and you're like, oh, I wonder what that sounded like, those are now up back-to-back on the Wins and Losses podcast as well, which I think many of you would enjoy hearing if you haven't already. Okay, a bunch of you want to weigh in, 877-996-6369. But let me just say this again about the SEC coming back and the fact that I think you would enjoy that conversation with Greg Sankey from the SEC. He came on and basically told us exactly what has happened. He said the reason why we are kicking off on September 26th is all of the experts on the campuses have told me that when my kids come back on campus in mid to late August, there's going to be an initial spike in the overall number of cases that are out there. And as soon as that spike happens, there's going to be a sort of panic that sets in. The way the media covers it, they're going to be running around. They're going to be terrified. And then my experts tell me, this is Greg Sankey, he said there's going to be an initial spike when the kids get back on campus, and then the cases are going to start to decline pretty substantially. And we believe by late September, the number of cases on campus will be down substantially. It'll be much safer to play college football then. And what's ended up happening? Exactly what he told us was going to happen. And unlike the Big Ten, which panicked, and unlike the Pac-12, which still can't figure out how to play, how to get their season restarted, the SEC, by starting on September 26th, then also the ACC and as well the Big 12, they have built in several different weeks to allow things not to go perfect and their schedules to still be played out. So that's important because when the Big Ten returns, there's no safety at all. There's no safety net. There's no ease of being able to play. Same thing for the Pac-12 in terms of being able to qualify for the playoff. You could end up with a scenario, unfortunately, in the Big Ten where Ohio State is only able to play 5 games. And would a 5-0 or 6-0 Ohio State deserve to get into the playoff compared with a 10-1 SEC team? I don't think so. What about a 10-1 Big 12 team or a 10-1 ACC team? All of those schools are playing a lot more games, and they should be able to get a lot more than the Pac-12 and the Big Ten. And I think that's a credit to the overall quality of the decision-making that was made in the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12. But in particular, Greg Sankey so far is looking like a genius. We'll see how things go with the SEC officially primed to kick off on Saturday. All right, let's take some of your calls, and then we'll go into break. We'll talk to Chris Mannix about this Laker loss and whether Laker fans, as they wake up on the West Coast and around the world and around the country, should be nervous about this series as we get ready for Game 4. Also, what he anticipates happening in the Celtics-Heat series. But first, who's up first, Dub?
We got Alan in Texas.
Alan, what do you think? Does it make sense at all for NFL coaches to have masks on the sidelines?
No, it doesn't, Clay. I'm actually a high school coach here in Texas, and I've been doing it for almost 30 years. And I can promise you, the last thing a coach is thinking about on the sidelines is putting on a mask during a game.
Do you coach still right now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So what are the rules in Texas? Do you guys on the sidelines, the coaches, supposed to have masks on?
Yes, sir, we are. In fact, a local school, not us, but another school, just got a reprimand from the UIL for the coaches and players not having masks on the sidelines.
Yeah.
When they're not in the game.
So I'm curious.
Go ahead.
Sorry to cut you off, but I'm curious from your perspective. Like, I'm assuming you guys have headsets on, off and on. How much more difficult is it to speak in a way that everybody can hear you, trying to call plays and coach in a mask as opposed to not having one?
It's a lot harder. Like I said, most of the time, I'm up in the press box, so I don't have to. We're still supposed to have our mask on, but I hardly ever keep my mask on in the press box.
Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting because do you think as a coach it's crazy that these NFL coaches in particular, because they're getting tested every day, which is different than what would be going on certainly at the high school level in Texas or anywhere else. But those guys are getting tested every day. None of the players are wearing masks. They're tackling each other. They're yelling at each other on the field. They're talking to their coaches, and yet the coaches have to have masks on. It doesn't seem to add up logically.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's you're the voice of reason on sports radio because you actually use facts, and the NFL is not using facts. They're being tested. I can almost understand us having to keep them on because we're not tested every day.
Yeah.
But
That's
the
right.
NFL and the colleges, they're being tested before they play. They know if they got it or not, and it's just asinine. It's like you've been talking about so much on your show for the last 6 months. They're not using facts. They're panicking. They're trying to be woke, and it's just stupid.
Thank you for the call. Thanks. I hope good luck for the season. Thanks for listening. I appreciate the call. I would imagine that it is incredibly difficult. James in Louisiana is on our OutKick VIP line. What's up, James?
Good morning, Clay. First of all, you can add me to that list with Dub. I've listened to to every word of the wins and losses so far as well.
So what would you say for people out there who haven't listened? And these are, by the way, conversations that are exclusive to the podcast. You can type in my name, Clay Travis. They'll pop up, and you can go through. You don't have to listen to all of them. I think there's 32 or 33 of them, but the roster of guests that I think people have to choose from is pretty substantial.
Yeah, I mean, you got everything from sports to some pop culture, a little bit of politics mixed in there. It's a wide range of guests that are on there.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thanks for listening.
Yeah. What I was going to say was, no, the mask on the sidelines doesn't make sense, much like a lot of this stuff that's happened in the last 6 or 8 months doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm kind of going to tie this back into high school football. Here in Louisiana, Hurricane Laura hit us here 3 weeks ago, and we are still struggling in this state from that. Last week, there was 120,000 people still without power in southwest Louisiana, and with no power in 95-degree heat, it can get a pretty swampy situation pretty quick, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm 4 hours north. I'm actually in Gina, which is where Whitlock wrote his column about that he mentioned a couple of weeks ago. We had no power for 2 weeks here, so we're struggling. And one might think, well, at least they have high school football to go back to and bring these small communities back together. But no, that's not the case. Louisiana's a deeply red state, but we have a blue governor. So there's our problem. He didn't release our students to even make contact practice until September the 8th. The state mandates them have 2 weeks of contact practice before they can even have a scrimmage. So scrimmages are happening this Friday, and then official games will start next Friday. And I'm watching football last weekend. Alabama, they've got 5 games in already. They're high school kids do.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, same thing has happened in Tennessee. We've got a full month of games that have already taken place here and all over much of the country. Now, thanks for the call, by the way. Lots of people out there listening. Maybe if you're in Illinois and you're listening, you're like, man, that sounds great that you get to start it all, because unfortunately there are a lot of kids that aren't getting to play high school sports anyway. And the sad thing at all this fall, the sad thing is it's almost entirely a reflection of whether the governor is a Republican or a Democrat. The truth of the matter is, if you have a Republican governor, your kid is probably able to play fall sports. If you have a Democratic governor, your kid is probably not able to play fall sports, which is just goes to the essence of all of this and how it's become political as opposed to logic-based. And I think the coaches wearing the masks on the sidelines in the NFL, given the fact that they're being tested daily and given the fact that the players are tackling each other, sweating all over each other, yelling at each other, standing on the sideline, talking to their coaches without masks on, it doesn't make any sense at all that NFL coaches would have to have masks and NFL players wouldn't. And 93% of you right now voting in our poll, as we approach 20,000 of you voting in the first hour, 93% of you are saying it doesn't make sense to be fining coaches $100,000 or for coaches to be wearing masks on the sideline at all. It's hard to get 93% agreement. We do these polls a lot. You've seen a lot of them over the years, Danny G. It's hard to get 93% agreement on anything.
Yeah, I probably have only seen this maybe 5 times in 5 years.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'll take one last call, and then we're going to go to break, and we'll talk with our NBA insider, Chris Mannix from SI, about that Laker loss last night and what he expects to see tonight in Game 4 going forward between the Celtics and the Heat. But one more call, Dub. Who is it?
Yeah, we got Josh in Kentucky.
Josh, what do you think?
Hey, Clay, let's talk about what these coaches are doing through the week when the cameras aren't on them with these players. Do we really feel like they're wearing masks all week in these meeting rooms and at practice? And maybe the day before a game, these coaches, there's no way that they're wearing masks with these players in the same room at practice the day before the game. It's just all it has to do with is when the cameras kick on.
Yeah, thanks for the call. That's why I've been calling it cosmetic theater. It is designed to look like you are doing something that matters while in reality not doing anything that matters at all. In other words, it's the perfect action for our modern social media era, which is pretty much characterized by people looking like they're doing things that matter while actually doing nothing that matters. Welcome to Instagram. Welcome to Twitter. Welcome to Facebook all day long, every day. The NFL's own version of kabuki theater.